And yes, speaking of different tourists who've come into the country, and let's go over to Larry Madowo, where he's attending the World Economic Forum, which is currently underway in Davos, Switzerland. And among the key concerns for global business leaders is on Brexit, President-elect Trump, trade policies, and matters shaping trade across the world. And what's the impact of all that to Africa? Well, Larry, we might ask you, why should a Kenyan care about, the World Economic Forum taking place in Davos?
So one of the interesting things, Laban, is that despite this being a meeting of some of the world's richest, most powerful people, issues about inequality often come up. For instance, this study by Oxfam came out this year at the World Economic Forum, which says the top 8 richest people in the world own as much as 3.5 billion worth, the bottom 3.5 billion people in the bottom of the pyramid. So that's a big deal. But also there's a few government officials here. Aden Mohammed, the CS for Trade and Industrialization, is one of those who's here. And he's taking meetings, trying to attract foreign direct investment into Kenya and just representing the government here. The only other senior government official here is the central bank governor. So this is the kind of people you're talking about. But we spoke to a short while ago to Aden Mohammed, the CS for Industrialization. This is what he's got to say about why he's here.
As Kenya, as Africa, we have a free trade arrangement with the US under the AGOA program. It is not clear yet what will happen to AGOA as part of this. The good thing is we haven't had anything at the moment, and we assume that because of the process it goes through as far as Congress and the fact that it has been, a bipartisan agreed arrangements, we don't necessarily see threats on that. But the fact that more companies in the US are beginning to look more inward in their countries as opposed to investing outside is a concern for everybody that is here. And we have got American businesses that are investing in Kenya and in the rest of Africa. What that means for them is something that, we all need to ask ourselves. The second major theme that I have been participating in is what is called, a theme that is described as a future of production.
So moving away from matters Kenyan trade, of course, with the world, let's look at what everyone is talking about. And of course, that is the inauguration of the 45th President of the United States, that it should take place tomorrow. And Larry, you mentioned that actually there are more Chinese investors than there are of American investors.
So there was a huge Chinese delegation here, and President Xi Jinping was kind of the star attraction with President Obama out of the world stage. It seems, and it's an unlikely proposition, but it's what happened, which is his speech was very well received. It looked like that of a speech of a global leader, and he even talked about climate change, which is something that President-elect Donald Trump has not been a keen fan of, especially. He's a climate change denier in many ways. So China is taking on the world stage, even though today the Prime Minister of Britain, Theresa May, was a star attraction, but China's speech here was very well received. So while a lot of people are kind of reckoning with the fact that tomorrow the US will have a new leader, and how does that play globally? For instance, the CS Aden Mohammed was just talking about, we have a trade deal as Kenya, as Africa, with the US and AGOA, but will that stand with the administration of President Donald Trump? People will have to wait and see about that. So people are reckoning with how different will the world look under President Donald Trump, and that begins tomorrow. So obviously a lot of people will be watching that inauguration in Washington.
Larry, and of course, coming hot on the heels, in my time at school at the University of Oxford, there was a lot of concerns, and of course, investors looking at Brexit. And from where you see it, of course, the business community is also very much concerned. From the people you've spoken to, what are some of their sentiments on Brexit?
So that is one of the things that has come up, especially today with that important speech from the British Prime Minister, Theresa May. She came through, and basically her headline was, Britain is open for business. Britain for Kenya is an important trade partner. Outside of Uganda, it is the biggest trade partner. So what does that mean? Kenya will have to reevaluate the trade agreements. Does that mean that things that need to be signed again? So whether they remain part of the EU or now that they're leaving the EU, how does that play for Kenya is a question that people like Aden Mohammed will be wondering about, but also everybody in terms of how this deals with the currency, what happens next. Globally, Brexit has been a big deal. We live in a post-Brexit world now. So how will that change things? It's when you speak to people here and the rise of populism, Brexit comes up, Donald Trump comes up, maybe a few other elections coming up around the continent here in Europe. So what will happen next remains to be seen, but what the Prime Minister of Britain was here to do was reassure people that the sky is not falling and there will always be a strong global player, but also that they're open for business.